welcome to this episode of the Martial Truth Podcast, my second interview with Andreas Quast Sensei. Andreas Quast is one of the premier researchers and authors in martial arts. He's written numerous books, as we'll see a bunch of them pop up right here. Okay, you can see they're all excellent. I highly recommend them all. You'll be able to go to his authors page. I'll make sure I put a link to his authors page. And here's Karate 1.0. All right. And highly recommend all his books. Every time I read something by Andreas Quast, I'm learning something. All right. As always, you like the podcast, please click that like, share, and subscribe. All right. Consider becoming a monthly member. I'll be in New York next month doing 4 days of seminars. Anyone interested in attending that, please reach out to James Waller. You can find it the event on Facebook. All right. Also, remember Walt Young's seminar coming up in October. We're trying to get enough people to attend that so we can make this happen. 3 masters from Fukuchikiden Kobudo Jujutsu coming in from Okinawa. Should be interesting. A kind of obscure system, not a lot of people practicing it. So it'll be a good opportunity to experience something different. All right. So please consider taking a look at that. So here we go. Interview number 2 with Andreas Quast. Andreas Quast, welcome back to the Martial Truth Podcast. Glad you consented to come on again. You were one of my favorite interviews. Always enjoy talking to you. So, what's going on?
Thank you very much for having me, Mike Sensei. I appreciate it. I like your how can I call it? Is it show, or is it, how do you call it, a podcast or video cast? Or
Podcast, fine, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it's great because you're kind of building like a repository of collections with all the other stuff you were posting, and this is a great stuff. And most of all, I like the way you communicate.
Thanks.
That's something that I personally appreciate. And that's why I like to come on your podcast. Thank you very much again.
Well, I appreciate you coming on.
So we had a short chat about the Atemi points and about the shofu that you call shofu.
Right.
And this is the alternative reading of Matsukaze, and we talked about it. It's
right.
this point here.
Right.
Above the clavicula.
Right.
And it's very cool because I looked up the school, your jiu-jitsu school, the Sosuichi. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yeah, Sosuishi or Sosui Shitsu. Both ways are correct.
Right, yeah. And as far as I understood, they came from the Takinouchi-ryu.
Yes.
Way back in the 1600 or something. Yeah. And Takinouchi-ryu is actually, it's basically the oldest jiu-jitsu style, direct jiu-jitsu style still in existence in Japan. So they had a lot of like old style, like armor-clad jiu-jitsu, like kumyuchi, and like torite, and they probably called their techniques like te, like in sense of like we call it te in karate. They call it. They have 103 te or so. That means techniques. And of course, they have the Atemi charts and Atemi strikes. And this is so interesting from the karate point of view, because we karate guys, because we kick and strike a lot, we always claim to understand and know what's going on. But sometimes I'm not sure about that.
I agree. I mean, I think, again, I always go back to, I think a big part of the problem with that is the fact that when people like Itosu, Yabukensu, Kion, Motobu, when these guys were around early, Kenwa Mabuni, Okinawa was not a safe place. There was still crime. There was still dangerous things in Okinawa. Now, modern times, you go to Okinawa, there's no crime. I mean, so again, it's so safe. I just think some of these practices have kind of fallen by the wayside. I just don't think they see a need for it necessarily, right? But, and even in like the jiu-jitsu style that I've been training in for over 40 years, they've kind of, even with the striking, it's not as emphasized. They do it, but
Mhm.
there's not a lot of talk about it. Like, oh, you just punch the guy. Not like saying, well, where
Mhm.
where do I specifically punch him? And as I said to you before we started, I said years ago I took a deep dive with several of my students, and we went
Mhm.
through all the jujitsu kata and we looked at all the striking techniques. And we
Mhm.
looked at, okay, so where would be the best place in this particular kata to strike the guy that would get the most, have the best effect, do the most damage? And we started breaking all that down, and that's what we kind of went with, right? Um, but like again, for years I heard in jujitsu, oh, you just hit the guy to loosen him up so you could do a joint lock or a throw on him. But we've come to understand, no, the strikes should be very high level. They have the potential to cause death. Um, at the minimum, when you strike the guy, there should be a pretty good result. Like he should be hurt. Okay. Um, it's not just a tap to loosen the guy up so you could do a joint lock on him. It's designed to incapacitate the enemy. So what we've realized from all these years of training in jujitsu is almost each one of the kata it's giving you different tools, right? So depending on the situation, well, I'm gonna hit the guy and try to take him out with the strike. Or maybe I don't need to hit this guy. Maybe I need to just take him into control. So now I'll do the joint lock or the wrist lock or whatever I'm doing, right? So I think it's giving you all these tools in jiu-jitsu, and you have to decide what tool you're going to do. Very similar to karate. I mean, karate, we have strikes, we have joint locks, we have throws. Well, why would we use a joint lock instead of a strike? Well, maybe we don't want to hurt the guy that bad. Maybe we just want to get him in control so we can make him calm down. Or, and you're a police officer. You want to handcuff him instead of beating him half to death. So I think in both styles, I don't think the striking techniques are looked at deeply enough in terms of where we should be striking. Like for instance, when I do Seisan in Ishinru, the first three punches when I step out, punch, 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 I strike to the same spot, and I always say it's like a hammer hitting a nail, right? But then when I do later on the block, punch, punch, kick, punch, when I do those two punches, I strike to the points that are just below the nipples.
Oh yeah,
So the
yeah, yeah.
first one I strike center line of the body, the solar plexus, the three punches. Then this one I strike 1, 2 here below the nipples. And again, I think there's a lot that the kata is teaching us that I think is probably being overlooked a little bit in modern times. And not just karate, I'm using as a general martial arts statement, you know?
Yes, good, very good point. I think that when you look at jiu-jitsu in Japan, you had a development in the late 1800s, where after the Meiji era, they were looking into jiu-jitsu and kendo for school, as a PE for school, and they had um, uh, uh, they assessed it medically. They looked at it medically, and then a guy he went together with the headmaster of the Tenjin Shinryu, and they looked into these points and they looked specifically into Atemi. And he came to this conclusion from a medical view that jiu-jitsu is too dangerous because of the striking, not because of the joint locks or so. He didn't look at this. And in the jiu-jitsu schools, as far as I know, in the original Japanese jiu-jitsu schools, the Atemi part, the striking part, it's also called satsu, which means killing. So Sapo is killing techniques and Capo is resuscitation
Resuscitation.
technique.
Yep. Yeah.
And these belong together. So because they belong together, it was not just striking. You had to have a lot of knowledge and skill to do that. And that's why these were leveled up like a Menkyo level. You wouldn't learn that at maybe Mokuroku or higher or something.
So just to give you an idea, the first time I went to Fukuoka to train with the headmaster in Sosui Shitsuru, I'm doing a particular kata, and then he says, okay, like this. And he shows me a different way to do it, that kata. So I look at him and I go, Sensei, what's this? And he goes, oh, this is like the henka, right?
No.
This is what's hidden, right? But you can't practice like this because this you can't take a fall from. Like this just breaks the arm. This just breaks the wrist. This just kills the enemy. The one technique was driving the spine into the knee. So you can't do that when we're training with each other because obviously people get hurt. So there were many kata where there was a practice version so we could go fast and the guy could take the fall. And then he showed me other versions where no, this is what is really going on. And when you do this, it's basically almost like you do this, you only do this once. Like this is going to cause damage, right? So yeah, like even the style of jujitsu I do, like we're calling it jujitsu. It was never called jujitsu. That's a modern term. It was called kumiuchi.
Oh,
It's called
yeah.
kumiuchi. So Sosui Shitsuru was called kumiuchi. It was not called jujitsu. The jujitsu term is modern. That's virtually every style of jujitsu was not called jujitsu. Yawara,
Right.
kumiuchi, these different terminologies, right? But kind of like you know, uh, other arts we've seen where the term jujitsu became kind of the catch-all. Oh, you do jujitsu, you know. So yeah, but yeah, I agree with you. The Atemi should be high level, and if it's done right, it's extremely dangerous.
It is. Let's talk about later about that for a while. But the thing is that in modern Japan, when Kano started the Kodokan Judo, he was an educator, so he couldn't confront the government because that was the government who was looking into Jiu-jitsu.
Right,
We are the medical school, today's University of Tokyo. And so he started to use the randori kata, right? The
right,
Nagawaza plus katame. And katame is, of
right,
course, Osai Waza, is Shinu Waza, and Kansetsu Waza.
right,
But this is controlled environment,
right,
right? And he left it out. And he started again to reintroduce Atemi, like around 1930s, first time, and then again in the 1950s. But in the beginning, and you still look at judo, when you learn judo anywhere in the world, you're not going to learn Atemi. You learn the Atemi when you do kata, and that is classical judo. That people do that who are 30, 40 years in the game. They do the like kimono kata, goshinjutsu no kata. They have the Atemis rebuilt in there, but otherwise, and I don't think many people know anything about this. And these are typical Atemi. They are all the suigetsu, here.
well,
There's the shofu, which you're going to matsukaze, yes.
well, if you look at Kodokan Judo by Kano, in the back there's a vital points chart
Oh,
that
oh
has
yeah.
all the vital points. There's a chart with the human body, and it's got all the vital points listed. That's in Kano's book on Kodokan Judo.
You mean the 1905 book?
Mm,
Because I'm genuinely interested in it, of course. Oh, by the way, Kano's Kodokan Judo, the Atemi of Kodokan Judo, they came basically from Yoshin-ryu, Tenjin Shinryu, and Shin no Shintoryu. That is what came to the Kodokan.
right. So the 14th headmaster of Sosui Shitsuru was also one of the contributors to the Kodokan curriculum.
Oh, you see?
He's in that photo. His name's Kibe Iogi. He's in the photo with all the jujitsu masters sitting with Kano.
Ah, yeah.
And I can show you. I'll show you something in the book in a second. I'm just trying to find the um.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
I'm trying to see.
That'll be cool. Yeah, and so, but in karate, let's talk about karate, because in the one of the first writings we have about karate, this is the letter of Itosu Anko, right, in 1908.
Right.
He mentions like irimi, like how you enter. He mentions torite, like all the grappling stuff and that kind of stuff. He mentions kuden, which is like, of course, the oral
Right.
instruction, because some things are too difficult to show or to write down, so it's easier and more effective too. But he doesn't say or talk about Atemi. So maybe they had the same idea for Okinawan school karate, right? They said maybe, damn, this is karate, but we cannot put it in there because the school authorities, the educational authorities, they will not allow that. They're going to stop the training. Maybe. What do you think?
Well, I do think that's a good possibility. I think they did try to make karate as safe as possible. And that's why they pushed it more, I think, as a physical fitness thing. That's why, like, you saw they were referring to it as karate gymnastics, right?
Yes, yes. Karate
So,
Taiso.
right. So
Yeah.
I think you saw some of the same stuff going on in Okinawa that you were seeing on the mainland. I mean, what was going on after the Meiji Restoration is a lot of so all the jujitsu schools now had no way to make money,
Yeah.
right? They were all so like Sosui Shitsuru, the style I study, was part of the Satsuma clan.
Oh, okay.
So the 12th headmaster died in the Satsuma Rebellion. So the
Oh,
12th headmaster of the art I do died in the Satsuma Rebellion. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So the 11th headmaster had to come out of retirement and become the 12th headmaster.
oh, okay.
Okay. Or excuse me, the 13th headmaster when the 12th
13,
master was killed.
13.
Um,
Yeah, right.
so after the Meiji Restoration, what was going on was they were trying to figure out how to make money, and they were almost doing things like the UFC. They were engaging in these public matches. But the problem was people were getting their arms broke, bones were sticking out. The general public was like, this jujitsu stuff, And I think that's what Kano saw. He saw that two things: that one, the jujitsu schools were going to die out because they had no way to make money, and two, that people thought of it as being done by thugs. And he decided, well, I'm going to make this part of the education system. I'm going to develop this in a way where I'm going to preserve the techniques, but in a safe way where we could do it as a sport and push that. And hopefully in that way, preserve the jujitsu, you know? And again, the style I do right now, even in Fukuoka, still, they're a major judo dojo. So they do judo and they do Sosui Shitsuru, the
Oh,
Sekirukan down in Fukuoka. So
oh, great.
yeah, so they do both, you know. And I'll just mention this too.
Oh,
So
that's great.
yeah,
Yeah, please continue.
so because again, this has to do with Atemi. Um, I was invited and I was given a tour of the Aikido Hambu dojo in Tokyo by the present by the present doshu, Kishimaru's Ueshiba's grandson, right? Um, he took us to a class and he knew my background because we had a mutual friend in Japan. And the Aikido class he took to, they were doing a lot of Atemi, a lot.
Mm.
So as they moved in to guide, they'd hit and then follow up. And I actually mentioned that to him. I said, Sensei, I'm seeing a lot of Atemi. In the States, you don't see that much Atemi. You see just the flowy Aikido. He goes, yeah, that's wrong. So that's what he said. So he says the Atemi is a part of Aikido, you know. So so again, I'm just saying you see the same kind of thing
We
flowing
knew it.
through, right?
We
So
knew it all the
yeah,
time,
yeah,
didn't we?
yeah,
We knew it.
yeah.
And that you use it to help. Uh, but it is a full strike. But if it works, it works. And if it not works, it just gives you the opportunity to get there. And there's nothing wrong with it. And there's a term for it, because there are always people who say, "Oh, that didn't exist. You made that up. You're right," and blah blah blah. But it's called the kariate. It's an interim strike.
Okay,
So interim, as seen either in the progression of the technique, it's right in there somewhere, or it's just means just just doing it shortly, and then that the function is it's different. Um, in the end, you put it all together, right? You use a little bit of striking, you use a little blocking at the same time, in order to get into the whatever elbow lock or whatever, or the shimowaza, and that's the most normal thing that there is. But it's great that he told you that. I like that.
Yeah. And you know,
It's
again,
a good stuff.
so one of the things too to realize too that I found is if you're fighting multiple opponents, you're using mostly strikes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Now you may be able to grab a guy and throw him into one of the other bad guys, but you can't be holding a guy in a joint lock while his three friends are jumping on you. You
Yeah.
know? So that's another reason why striking is important. That's why if you don't have the ability to strike, you're at a huge disadvantage in combat.
Oh yeah.
A huge disadvantage.
You take that away, and people make fun of striking uh, because of jujitsu and so. But before you said the guys are training judo and the jujitsu, and I like that idea because if you look at the old judo guys, these were bulls like that, and but you see so many martial artists, particularly past 40 or 50. It's not even that they're not fit, but you see they have never in their whole life ever been close to anything that you could call athletic. And that's why it is so important to have a sport part in that. Just very, very ordinary training. That what hurts, that what makes you a little bit more of an athlete. And then your jiu-jitsu is getting much more better.
So
But the striking, yeah.
I was just going to say in college I studied judo for 6 months. They had a
Yeah,
judo club.
you learn a lot by just rolling a little bit, right? You
So
don't have to make a career of it.
right. And but it was interesting. I was a brown belt in karate at the time. So we're going way back, okay? And a couple of the one black belt and a brown belt of the teacher came up to me after class one day and said, "Hey, could you teach us how to block a punch?" And that
So
always
they
kind
didn't know it.
because they didn't know. And that always kind of struck me as I looked at them and said,
Ah,
you guys don't learn how to block a punch?" And they're like, "No, no, we don't do that. We just do randori."
yeah. And they get graded, I think, up to fifth dan simply by attending tournaments. I don't think they even need to win. You just have to have a certain number.
Right.
Like you have to have if you're a pilot, you have to have your
Right.
hours, your
Right.
flight hours, right? Something like that.
Right.
And then you get the rank up to fifth dan.
Right.
So what would be the motivation? Similar to karate these days.
Right.
What would be the motivation to study kimono kata or goshin jutsu no kata?
So
Or go further and do this controlled environment and say, okay, let's get it on. I want to try it.
so the
Doesn't make
interesting thing is I studied with a woman by the name of Rusty Kanakogi, very famous in the United States. She pretended to be a man and trained at the Kodokan with the men.
I
Yeah.
never heard of him.
Oh yeah, Rusty Kanakogi. You can look her up. Rusty Kanakogi.
Rusty.
She passed away a couple of years ago. Anyway, her husband's name was Rohei Kanakogi. So he came to the club the one day, and I took him on the side. I said, "Sensei," I said, "I'm interested in learning the judo kata." And he went, he's looking at his wife, right? And he's going,
It's cumbersome.
she
Oh,
only she only wants to do randori, no kata. I said, "Okay." I said, "Okay." But there was a guy in New York teaching at a YMCA in the city. His last name was Matsumura, and he taught the judo kata. He was very good. He was technically excellent, and he also taught the judo kata. So, so there are a few of them out there doing the full judo curriculum, but a lot of them only do the sports side. They don't do any of the kata. So,
I mean, you got to decide, right? It's a huge curriculum. Same as in karate, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Who's gonna know all that practically? You have to choose something that fits you best, right?
well, like Gakia Sensei one time in Mariyoshi Kobudo, I said to him, "Sensei, what about nunchaku basics?" And he literally went, "Oh, Michael, too many things, too many." He goes, nunchaku basics, nunti basics, gua basics, tinbei. Where does it stop? He goes, we have sai, tonkwa, bo basics. Everything else learned from the kata. All we'll do is practice basics, you know? And I look at a lot of the current senior Matayoshi guys, especially the Westerners, and they've got basics for everything. And they're making new kata and they're doing all this. And I just say to myself, okay, how much stuff do we need? How much do we need? I don't know. You know, like the jujitsu, so Sui Shitsu has 48 two-man kata.
That's a
Now,
lot.
but they're short. So it's only each kata goes like this because the guy attacks, you take him out. End of kata, right? And then they also have 26 Iai-jitsu kata. So
that's 69 that you need to know, because you need to know the uke part, and that's 52. That's 148 kata you need to know because you need to know the uke and the tori part. That's a lot of stuff, and that's the thing that most people prevents from entering the serious kata thing. But
right.
in judo, it's the same. It's cumbersome. All
Right.
the slurping on the mat, and then this and bow and that. All this is it's horrible. It's too much. It's too much of formalism,
Right.
right? But then again, the techniques, the I mean, judo and jujutsu, they are famous for the Shimowaza,
Right.
right? For Nagawaza and for Shimowaza. Everybody knows that. And also Katama Waza. And we in karate, we can use all of this very, very good. So it's very helpful if you know these things, or if you just train a little bit in these things. It's very helpful for the understanding or analysis of karate kata, the bunkai or oyo, or however you want to call it. And Atemi is interesting. It is the same, because it's also, according to Mabuni's book, he has these drawings of Atemi from Itosu, and these are Chinese, so the names are different than in Japanese jiu-jitsu.
Right.
And the names are like 1 day death, 1 week death, 2 months death, 3 years death. And I wondered recently, does it really mean that the guy dies, or does it mean that that's the time, how long it takes until he's back on his feet again? But of course, it means the person dies, right? But I don't know who taught that. If that was taught to anybody, where are the names, the Chinese names? There is nothing. It seems like nobody learned it. And even like, if Itosu had these papers from somewhere, it doesn't mean that he learned it from a master in an unbroken tradition from China.
Right.
Right.
If you have, is that in any of Mario's books on Mabune? Is the list of those in those books?
But Seipai no Kenkyu, yes, the study of Seipai.
But would the Chinese names be in there?
I don't know how he translated it.
If you have the Chinese names and you send them to me, the next time I see my Taiji master, I'll have him take a look at them.
Yeah.
Because my Taiji master has discussed striking points with me also.
It's like this.
Okay, I'll have to take a look. I'll see if they're in there.
Yeah.
And I'll have to show that to my Taiji master next time.
I think Mario did this, and Seipai no Kenkyu would be the book.
Okay.
But it's a little confusing, because sometimes in the Bubishi, it talks about, in connection with the vital points, it talks about weapons. This is typically for spare weapons.
Right.
And so, and then there's a lot of where you have 36 points or something, and everybody thinks this is a Shaolin, but in fact, this is like herbal treatment, where they say, okay, this is the point, that is the point, this is the point, this is the name of it, and how you can treat it, and all this kind of stuff. So I think the Bubishi is not solved, for the simple reason that nobody ever learned this.
Right.
It's nice to look at.
Right.
I know maybe you told me, or someone, that Matayoshi and other people in the post-war era, maybe Uechi, they were looking at the Bubishi pictures and they were studying it. So I can imagine that they were doing like these kind of things there, right? Why not? So probably was, but if anybody would have learned this, some snippets of Chinese language or something would have survived, even if it existed and someone knew it, because nothing survived. It doesn't look like anybody learned it and continued it in personal tradition. So where does the Atemi striking point tradition in Okinawa karate come from? I could say that nobody ever talked about it until Funakoshi Gishin in 1934. He published an Atemi chart, front and back of a person.
Right.
And the names were all Japanese names.
Right.
These were the shofu that you had, the Matsukasa, the typical names that they had in the Kodokan, in Yoshin-ryu, in Tenjin Shinryu, and Shino Shindo-ryu.
Right.
Standard Japanese Jiu-jitsu Atemi. So we talked about that before. So they have these Atemi in a karate book. Everybody thinks Funakoshi Gishin, okay, he's a student of Itozu Anko and Asato Anko. So these points must be classical Okinawan karate points. And actually, these illustrations, they appeared later in the post-war area in Okinawa. The same stuff. You find it in Uechi Dojo.
Right.
Japanese names, not Chinese Fujian crane tiger something. You find it in Higaonna Sensei's book of 1985. It's newly painted person, same points, same names from Funakoshi, and so on and so on. So they took it thinking, oh, this must be Okinawan karate. And then they had an idea how they can apply, like do this from Pasai or do the techniques. And then they had something they could, how can I say, visualize what the karate technique is. That's what one possibility, of course. That's not necessarily.
I also think that when they were studying in China, whether it was at the Ryukyu house or somewhere else, I'm sure that some of the instructors that they were training with in China were talking about vital points. I mean,
probably, yeah.
Again, like my one student is a Chinese medicine doctor. So we've talked about the points, the acupuncture points. And, he says right out, he says, good luck hitting one of those. He goes, they're so small. He goes, and, in a fight, you're both moving and, but he goes, when you look at the vital points, like the general vital points we talk about, whether it's the eyes, the throat, the side of the neck, the solar plexus, the groin, the liver, the ribs, whatever, those are there. You can hit those easier. Those are easier to hit where you have to be precise, but you're not looking to hit a point that's the size of a dime. Like,
that's right.
And you're not
one very important difference, right?
And the other thing is you're not hitting them in any type of order. Like, okay, I'm going to hit you here, there, and there, and this is what's going to happen. No, this is all like hypnotism stuff. This is all make believe,
That's right.
In a real fight, it's violent, and it's can you get your strike to land in a spot that hurts the opponent, that makes him stop his attack. That's the question, right?
That's the question, right? But it's an interesting point, because the strikes they have, they came up with in Jiu-jitsu that you find in the Kodokan, and you find from Funakoshi, and you find in the guy who did Otsuka of Wado-ryu, he studied one Jiu-jitsu school. So they have all been integrated from over a long period of time from a number of schools. So they're basically all the same.
Right.
And when they look into it, they have the point on the illustration is very tiny.
Right.
But the description is very easy to understand.
Right.
They say, okay, you have the Murasama on the left, you have the Matsukaza on the right, and there's a vagus nerve.
Right.
The vagus nerve does this and that. Then you have the jugular vein, you have the carotid artery,
right.
And you have the Frigus, phrenic nerve.
Phrenic nerve. The phrenic nerve.
Yeah. And so if you compress them, either by
Oh,
Shimabasa, well, if you do this, either by Shimi, or if you strike them violently. And
so
this is a point. You need to strike it violently.
violently, right?
And not just like softly like this. We do it to protect the partner or for safety reasons, but you really have to strike it. And then they had certain techniques they would use for this thing. So in Jiu-Jitsu, when they said Matsukaze in one school, it didn't mean just the point. It meant the attack. How do I use it? Do I use it the elbow?
Right.
Is it Shimabasa? Is it shopping Stouchi?
Right.
Is it Nakatake can?
Right.
Or they had a can they called Aku can,
Right.
which is like similar. We talked about it like in Echiru, where
Right.
you have this
Right.
strike, and it works.
Right.
This works
Oh,
100%. And they do the same hand in this jiu-jitsu, and just the 3 fingers over the thumb like that. And then they would strike with this switch here.
Yeah.
And it works. You're not going to hurt yourself. You have, when you look from the side, it's an additional 2 centimeters. I mean, it's all a lot of talking I'm doing right now. But so they had a concept of the point to strike, how to strike it, in which direction, with which weapon. In karate, they took the same points and they said, okay, we got nothing, but we got the kata. So we're going to project the kata on the illustrations, on this framework of Japanese old jiu-jitsu Atemi points. And then we're going to use our hands. And in terms of hand weapons, I think karate is a little bit better than jiu-jitsu. They have so much more techniques with the hands. So yeah, I think it's at least an interesting theory, isn't it?
well, I think because karate emphasizes striking so much more. So I think when you work on striking more, obviously your strikes will develop more if you're training correctly. A couple of things. One, I asked Master Shimabuku Kichiro one time. I was asking him, like, Sensei, what techniques would be good for me in law enforcement? And he told me the first thing he said was shoot the uchi to the side.
Okay.
He said, Michael, hit the guy here hard, easy knockout. That's what he actually said, the words easy knockout. Now his father in Isshinryu, we have a basic in Isshinryu that looks like this. Here and here, right? According to the story, I've heard 2 versions of it. Tatsuo's in the Philippines working in the fields, the founder of Isshinryu. And the one night he was sick, so it was a Friday night. He stayed behind in the bunkhouse, and all the other guys went in to drink and carouse and do whatever they were doing. He wasn't feeling good. And a couple of guys came in the bunkhouse to steal all their stuff. And Tatsuo confronted him, and the one guy came at Tatsuo with a knife. And as he came at him with a knife, Tatsuo just chopped the hand aside and struck him in the side of the neck. So the version I hear most of the time is Tatsuo killed him with 1 strike. That's the version I hear most of the time. One person says that Tatsuo knocked him out with 1 strike. But either way, that strike to the neck was very effective. I can tell you, being in law enforcement, I've probably hit people in the throat, I would say 10 times. Every time I've hit them in the throat, they went down. Like, they went down. They were not, unless you really get hit in the throat, you can't imagine how debilitating it is. I mean, it's bad. Okay. Same thing, like you talked about Atemi Waza. I've probably choked out 15 people to unconsciousness. And when I say people, I mean criminals, right? I've probably choked out 15 of them. Never killed one. I mean, if you think about it, if you know how to do it right, it's very humane because the person doesn't get hurt. You know, you choke them out, they go to sleep, you handcuff them, they come to in a minute and they're fine and everything's good, right? So so like you saying, like the being able to choke is a very important skill. Even some ability to fight on the ground is an important skill. I'll tell you right out, Andreas, when I was in Okinawa, this came up. 2 things came up while I was in Okinawa. I said, I said knife. Why isn't
Oh,
anybody defending against the knife? And I said, and why don't I see any Okinawan masters teaching any type of ground fighting? And I
uh,
said to them, I'm not talking about rolling around on the ground with the guy and trying to put each other in these holes and stuff. I'm talking about you're on the ground, you have to do something so you can get back up and continue the fight. And like I said to them in Ishinru, Tatsuo Shimabuku had a ground fighting curriculum. Like he taught the Marines some ground fighting. He taught the Marines a handful of knife defenses. And the response was, well, Okinawa is very safe. And my response was, well,
mm,
do Okinawans travel? Do they travel to other parts of the world where maybe it's not so safe? And maybe they should have an understanding of how to face someone armed with a blade? Or what if they get knocked to the ground? They should know some techniques for how to be able to get out and get back up. So it's
wow.
it's it's interesting how the changes we've seen in these various martial arts. You know, I, I
Oh
think
yeah,
I think if
yeah.
we I think if we were training with Itosu, I think the curriculum would have covered fighting on the ground. I think there would have been someone coming at you with a blade. I think these guys would have worked a lot of different things that were a little bit more realistic, a little bit more dangerous. Um, you know, but but again, now it's so safe on Okinawa. Even in Japan, I'll just tell you right out. I went to the Metropolitan Police Headquarters. I asked the police trainers, how often do you face a criminal armed with a gun? What do you think their answer was?
3 times a year.
They said virtually never. That was their response. I said, what
Uh,
about a knife? They looked at each other, they talked a minute, and they go, we hardly ever face anybody armed with a knife. And
mhm.
I was with another police officer student of mine, and we looked at each other and said, can you imagine if we went out on patrol every night and we didn't have to worry about facing someone armed with a gun or someone armed with a knife or armed with any kind of weapon? Oh my God, like the stress would be so much less. But we don't have that, right? You know, in Germany too. I mean, there's people with weapons in Germany. We see it, right? We see it in Europe, the United States, South America. I mean, you have to be able to have an idea of how to deal with
Yeah,
these things, you know?
but from the level, like there's a hierarchy. There are leagues. So we are very low. At least we came up. We are upcomers recently, but I think for us, then the US is like, I have no idea what to do. I have no idea what I'm completely incompetent in these questions of, like, for example, firearms.
Right.
But the one thing, nightmare level, that's South America. Like, I'm telling it, like, I have these visions from this tattooed guy. He's in the Hollywood guy. I mean, he's an actor,
Right.
but the machete something, this nightmare.
Well, the number one attack worldwide, the number one weapon attack worldwide is a machete.
Is it?
Yes.
Oh God, man. We have a lot here recently. We people are, and I guess like it's kind of a coping mechanism. It sounds stupid, but I want to think like these guys think. So I think they don't have the time, they don't have the resources, they don't have the interest in training 10 to 15 years. They know you can get choked out. Every child can choke someone out today. These techniques, they were once the secret of certain jiu-jitsu schools. They held in secret. They would not tell no one, and it would work every time. But now everybody knows it because they gave it away. So how are you gonna be Mr. Big Ball guys walking around if you cannot do any jiu-jitsu, any martial
Well,
arts, any no nothing?
th-
So probably you take a knife.
this
That's
is
what I think maybe
yeah,
is the psychology behind it. I
yeah.
don't know.
Well, and this is what I say too is like that's why you have to be able to strike somebody in the eyes. You have to be able to hit somebody in the throat. And I worked with a
Yeah,
lot of police officers that wouldn't poke somebody in the eye. They just couldn't do it. It's just,
yeah,
you know, a lot of women can't do it. And that's one of the things I teach women. If you can't poke a man in the eye, you are probably not going to be able to survive the encounter. You are probably going to lose. You're going to get hurt. You have to be able to poke him in the eye, strike him in the throat. I mean, these are the
yeah.
number one most important things in self-defense, you know? Um,
Absolutely right.
and
By the way, I saw. Yeah.
And I wanted to tell you something. I don't know if you were aware of. When we're talking about the choking out and parts over here. So doctors are trained that if the patient on the operating table starts to exhibit certain things, they reach in and they squeeze and they make the patient pass out. They make them pass
Really?
out. Yeah.
Really?
Yes. Yes. I've
Uh,
spoken. My one student here is an emergency room doctor, and my wife's a doctor. And my wife said, yeah, she goes, you reach in, you grab, you twist, it makes the person pass out. So if their blood pressure spikes like crazy or something, they do
oh,
that.
yeah.
So yeah,
Okay. Oh yeah, that's a science, you know. They know
yeah,
everything about the sympathicus and
oh yeah,
parasympathicus, and they're the real kung fu masters, I guess.
yeah, yeah.
So, but anyway, I saw your or a parts of your knife seminar that you did at Asata Dozo
Oh yeah.
of James Pakowitz Sensei. That was cool
Thanks.
because I remember years ago James asked online, he said, where are the knife techniques? Where are all the knife techniques in karate? And of course, there were none. There's maybe, as you said before, you know,
Right,
1900, before Itosu, at that time, before they came into school, before they had to whitewash karate
right,
to make it socially acceptable
right,
for the education authorities. They had all these things, and maybe they did it in secret. But then 40 years, 50 years went by, and nothing happened anymore. And so it's gone. But the good thing is, you can ever learn it, like back learn it. Like,
right,
for instance, ground fighting, well, even if you're a karate master, it's not going to hurt you if you look somewhere else, right?
right. Of course. Well,
If you look at,
and what I was going to say was like that. What you saw that I did for James, that was only a little bit of the curriculum.
I'm sure.
Like James talked to me that night. He goes, I said, listen, this is only a little bit of the curriculum. He says, man, I'd love to go over everything. I said, well, next time I come back or, whatever. He goes, yeah. I said, yeah, it's a pretty wide curriculum. And again, also my approach to it is we start simple and then it gets harder and harder and harder. And the attacks become more real. So instead of like you see all the karate guys, the guy comes in with the knife and he just stands there and the guy does a
Yeah.
technique on him. No, we start where it's multiple stabs and you have to be able to stop that. But people see me do the basic curriculum and they think, "Oh, that's all there is." Oh, the guy's not just going to stand there. No, 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 no. That's to build the confidence of the student. Later on, like in the New York school, we put on clear visor helmets and a guy takes a knife and now he's trying not a real knife but he takes either a wood knife or a hard plastic knife and he's trying to stick you and you have to prevent him from doing it. And we wear the plexiglass because if God forbid you don't want to get hit in the eye or something, right? But yeah, I mean, so you know
Yeah.
it's I mean, we in
I
my
think,
dojo I teach how to disarm baseball bats, clubs, even chain, a guy swinging a chain at you, knife. I do gun disarms. People say, oh, like I see guys say, oh, you'd never be able to disarm a guy with a gun. There's videos all over X and all over everywhere else of people disarming guys with guns. Of course, you can disarm a guy with a gun. So it's, so I do it all the time. I mean, I feel for the people that train with me, that's one of the reasons they're here. They want to learn how to do that. They want to be able to, if God forbid the guy does stick a gun in their chest, what can I do? So, but
yeah,
but
it's good stuff.
yeah,
I think people are quick to criticize others, and that's a mishabit, I think. It's horrible. Even it happens to everyone. It
yeah,
happens to me sometimes, you know, when I feel, damn, I'm jealous that guy's so good. I'm gonna write something like putting him down, diminishing his achievement. Okay,
right,
I'm gonna do that. I understand that, but
right,
if you do that for a hobby, then something is wrong, right? It's important to do that. And one of the greatest things that you have in when you do the jiu-jitsu is that you work with a partner. That's number one, so that you don't do the ikenisatsu from the start.
Right.
because you cannot work like that. Number two, you lose now because in order to get that speed and to get the finesse of the technique, you need to be relaxed as a
Yep.
partner.
Right.
I let the guy work
Right.
20 times, 30 times, 50 times, and then he's going to do it even though I'm going to try to not let him. And the next best thing is if he hurts you, next time is your choice,
It's your
because
turn.
you always
Right.
change through, right?
Right.
It's always changing through. That's a good thing. So if he hurts you, if he slams you too hard, you're going to slam him next
And
time, double that.
I don't know if you're aware, but in the training, you know, the guy that takes the falls first is always the senior guy.
Oh yeah, that's that. That's something that uh because we're talking a lot about humbleness in karate, but it seems to be like I want to be the guy. I'm talking through the gymnasium. Everybody's listening, sitting there, falling asleep. Well, I'm having my, my speech,
Right.
my theater show, and in short, I think it's the same. When you have a shidachi and the uchidachi, it's a teacher who provides the opening, who makes the mistake so that you as a student can learn to take an advantage of that gap. But the thing is, as a teacher, you need to know how to counter that thing. So you need to know more. But the didactics, the philosophy of that teaching, I think it's great.
Yeah. The other thing is they say that the reason the senior takes the falls first is the attacks have to be correct.
Oh yeah, that makes
So
sense. Yes.
if the attack is off, the technique won't work.
Oh
So
yeah, that's right.
so
Yeah.
that was one of the things I was told. And then like eventually, like you said in the beginning, the training is choreography. You know, the guy's got to do the technique over and over and over again, you know. But eventually, when you're doing the kata, if a mistake is made on either side, then you go off script. Like then it changes. And then when the student says, "Why'd you do that?" Then you explain to him, "Oh, you missed this technique. You didn't do this. That gave me an opening to counter you." The problem is that's something you're not seeing practiced really in Japan anymore. Most of the Ko-Ryu are just doing choreography. They're not working up to
Well,
where when you're working with a partner, if your partner makes a mistake, that's your chance to go off script and do something else and see how he responds to that. If both people do everything correct, then the kata, yeah, it looks the way it was always intended to look. But as you and I both know, mistakes are made. And when the mistake's made, can you take advantage of that mistake? That's part of the training. It's no different in combat. If you're in combat and you launch a technique and the opponent makes a mistake, well, you better be able to take advantage of the mistake. So that's the way the training should be in the jiu-jitsu. The prearranged kata should eventually get to that level, you know? So,
right. Yeah. Interesting. I guess it's difficult for all these schools, number one, to survive,
oh yeah,
to find suitable successors and
yes,
train them. Then these systems they accumulated over over hundreds of years, so they are fast, big systems. Uh, People have a lot of things to do, so it's a lucky event if you find someone who has time and the interest, the energy, the continuity, and everything that's necessary uh, to fulfill that. And that's why I think what they do today is more really like more a cultural practice for many of the Ko-Ryu Jujutsu schools.
right.
120 years ago, this was all still, let's say 140, like around 1880. There was all really secrets. When they had the secret techniques, they had secret chops, for instance, where they would dislocate the jaw. They would go to the red light circle. Not only Motobu did that. These were guys who were skilled. Skilled guys did that. They would go to the red light district, then they would like provoke some people like verbally, and if they would like, you know, take the bait, they would use this chop to dislocate their jaw.
So
and because the jiu-jitsu school at the time, they always had a bone setting school practice somewhere nearby, and so all they did it themselves. So because the satsu, the killing technique, and the kapo, the resuscitation technique, were one thing, which is not the same and is not done today anymore.
right.
And then the guys with the dislocated jaw, they would come to the bone setting practice and get it fixed in, and probably pay a little money for it, even so like that. So it was a business.
So speaking of that, you mentioned Motobu and these guys. I'm sitting with Angi Uezu, who is Tatsuo's son-in-law, the founder of Ishinru's son-in-law. And I asked Angi Uezu, Sensei, did Tatsuo Sensei ever teach you about dislocating or Yubi Waza finger techniques? And a bunch of Angi Uezu's senior black belts are sitting there. And Angi looked at me and goes, "Oh yes, Tatsuo would teach us how to dislocate the jaw, how to unhinge the jaw, and then he goes and he teaches how to dislocate the fingers, right?" And all of Angi's black belts are looking at each other like, "What is this guy talking about?" Right? And afterwards, one of them said to me, "What made you ask that question?" I said, "Well, because it's a question I want to know the answer to." Like again, everybody thinks karate is just kicking and punching.
Yeah,
It's a lot more than kicking and punching.
I think you are particularly a person who is doing that
Yeah,
with karate.
yeah,
Because as you said, they don't ask, and I have this experience. That's the way it is in Japan. They
right.
never ask anything, right?
Yeah.
They
Like
just pretend to ask
yeah,
to, or sensei, tell us a story from back then or
right,
something,
right,
like being nice,
right.
right? But that's a very, very good question. It's also a great answer. I never heard that.
Yeah, I had never heard it either. I was surprised when Angi Uezu Sensei said it, you know? And even when I was in Okinawa this last time, I spent a day with Master Shimabuku Sensei, and I was talking to him, and I don't know what made me ask the question, but I said to him, I said, "Hey Sensei, did you train with Taira Shinken Sensei also?" This is Kichiro Shimabuku, Tatsuo's son.
Huh?
And he looked at me and he laughed and he goes, "Of course I trained with him." He goes, "He's standing right there teaching my father. I'm right next to my father. Well, of course I trained with Taira Sensei." And again, like I'm thinking to myself, like, Mike, why didn't you ask him this question before? Like, right? So yeah, I mean, if you don't ask the question, you don't know what answer you're going to get. So it's always interesting. And again, I get it. A lot of people are afraid to ask questions because in Japan, the protruding nail gets hammered down, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't care. I ask the questions and I want an answer because I think, again, how am I supposed to understand something if I don't ask a question and get clarification on a point, you know?
So from my experience, that with a nail, with the protruding nail, that is that's right. But there's a difference between people. For instance, how you behave.
Oh,
You're not
right.
a protruding nail.
All
You
right.
are you are bold in asking that questions, and
Right.
they understand that.
Right.
So they would think, oh, he's got balls.
Well,
That's what they think. They not consider you like someone who's rude or like a protruding nail. They
and
consider you a protruding nail for other reasons
right.
maybe. But this is a completely different story. That has nothing to do with asking the right questions.
Well, you know what else I think too is I think a lot of times they're surprised by the question. Meaning,
Yeah,
I think they're like, "Oh, no one's ever asked me this question before."
yeah.
Like no one had
They
ever
never
asked Angi Uezu that question. No one had ever asked him that question, right? And then when he gives the answer, these guys are all shocked, right? But yeah, that's why you got to ask questions, you know?
Cool. Yeah. Communication is number one. Communication is key. And it's the one thing that most people struggle with,
Right.
right? Because it's too easy to fall into the traps of communication, like being not really interested in what you say, not being like, interested in the topic, and like being too, how can I say, inactive, just like leaning back and waiting for someone else to do some talking, and not willing to evolve a story on the spot because we don't have a screenplay here or something,
No.
but we just go by the topic, and that's what makes it interesting. If we would just read from a storybook, that would be very, very boring.
Well, I asked Kichiro Shimabuku Sensei also. I said, Sensei, did your father choose which kata he learned from Taira Sensei, or did Taira Sensei choose? And he gave me an honest answer. He says, Michael, I don't know. I'm not sure. Now, I think probably Taira picked which ones he wanted to teach Tatsuo. But
Yeah,
my
that's
my
interesting.
but the fact that I like, that's another thing. Like, if the teacher doesn't know, I appreciate the Michael, I just don't know. I like, okay, I can
Yeah,
accept that. Like, you're giving me an honest answer rather than
yeah,
make something up. You know what I'm saying? So,
yes.
you know, but hey, I want to give you a book a plug.
Hey, it's my book.
This is Andre's his most recent book, Bo Volume 1. Okay. Very interesting book. It's about the a lot of the bow dances and bow ceremonies that go on in the various Okinawan cities, different islands, um, different villages, and how they relate to the bow kata. You see a lot of similarities. And what's great about it, it talks about one of the actual bow dances, and then there's a QR code, and it goes right to a video of the bow dance being described in the book. So highly recommend if you're into Okinawan weapons. Fantastic. All right. It gives you a little bit more cultural insight into the importance of the bow within the culture of Okinawa. So excellent.
Thank you very much for sharing this. Yeah, there's a lot of information that are unnecessary. But if you want to find gold or diamonds or opals or whatever, you're gonna move a lot of. I'm not saying dirt, but quantity.
Right.
It's just quantity. So it can happen to you if you really like research that you read 1,000 pages for nothing,
Right.
seemingly nothing, because of course you always learn something in the process. And yeah, but that's the thing. But the better then, if you find something that's valuable or that's new information or that adds to an existing theory or to existing knowledge, then it's it's a great moment. It's a great moment.
Well,
And
one of the things with the book that impressed me was it just clearly shows the importance of the bow within Okinawan culture. And again,
yeah,
like for me, being someone that's very into the realistic side of martial arts. Okay, so what's the first weapon? A rock or a stick, right? Those are the first weapons. Nothing comes before those. Obviously, your hands, whatever, your teeth, okay, fine. But I'm saying an external, something not part of the body. The guy
yeah,
picks up a rock, use it. The guy picks up a stick and uses it, right? So you could see where, um, from a human nature standpoint, the staff, the stick, has a unique
yeah.
place within weaponry,
It is
you know? And
absolutely.
yeah, and they say the same thing with the sword, which I agree because so many cultures have such a rich sword tradition, but the staff tradition is much older
It
because it,
is
it predates the ability to mold metal into blades. So
absolutely.
yeah, so it's fascinating when you see the different ways of using the various sticks, whether it be a short stick, a longer stick. It's just fascinating, and to see how they coded a lot of the techniques within the dances is also very interesting. You know,
Yeah. So they made it kind of acceptable so that you can perform it at a cultural festival, and in April when the Seed Festival, or what's it called, so that it's not too, let's say, wild,
Right. Right.
and nice clothes, some color, little music,
Right.
and that. But the technique is the same.
Right.
The technique the young boy did when he first came under a mammoth and pierced it from behind before he ran out and fall down the slope and then followed the dying mammoth.
Right.
That is the same technique as you do the thrust,
Right. Well,
basically. So that's an awesome story because it's true. It's a stick.
well, same with the spear, right? So the spear is considered one of the classic weapons, right? Okay, but without the staff, you don't have the spear.
Yeah. So the spear is basically the staff you mean with an iron spearhead,
Yeah,
right?
with a
The iron
blade on
staff,
the end
yeah.
of it, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying,
But,
right?
you know the Schöninger spears is in Germany, and they are 200,000 years old, and uh, they survived in an oxygen-free layer of I don't know exactly what that is, but so there's
Okay.
no oxygen in it,
Right.
and they found like 10 or 15, and together with like horse bones and things like that, so they're 200, 250 now, the latest. Before they said 300,000, but yeah, the oldest full intact wooden spears in the world. And they rebuilt them to try out how with spare athletes how far they can throw them, and they were like 60, 70 meters or so. So I mean, and also I think they said the Neanderthal, they had their one arm was bigger than the other, because either you saw this or you thrust. So usually the spare, you have the right hand in the rear, and because you use your power. So that's maybe where right-handedness comes from, even.
Well, if you look at virtually every martial art is right hand heavy.
Is it right? Yeah,
In
that's true. Yeah.
The Chen style Tai Chi in the form, which the form is documented to be 400 years old. So we only punch with the right hand in the basic form. In the cannon fist, we punch with both hands. But in the basic form, and when I asked, I said, why don't we punch with the left hand? The teacher said, well, you could practice punching with the left hand. He goes, but most people are right-handed. So, I mean, Japanese swordsmanship, all right-handed, right? It's just
That's right. Yeah.
interesting how, I mean, it's true. So if they were seeing that development of the Neanderthal, right? So, most people that tried to punch me with their right hand. Right? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
just saying, it's just the way it is, right? It's
Yeah.
mostly it's heavy. Society is mostly right-handed. There's not as many left-handed people, right?
By the way, I talked to Rafael. He's a doctor. He studied medicine, and he is somewhere in San Francisco. And this was in connection with the Atemi stuff.
Okay.
And he sent me something. So he wrote an article for an interview. So he went to he had found some like 4 different studies on emergency rooms, and he took everything out that was like car accident or weapons stuff, so that he filtered out what was like unarmed combat or fighting or whatever, fisticuffs, however you want to call it. And then he looked into it and came to certain conclusions, right? And this is known before. It's a right hand that's the perpetrator, and it's a head that's the target. That's what it boils down to. Right? Everything else is just a variation, right? Or yeah, the
Um.
kick to the I think the falling, that's the most dangerous
Oh yeah.
thing that can happen. So if you even if you get punched in the face, and even if you have a cut or something, that's not a big deal. But the big deal is when you fall and you get unconscious. When you're unconscious and fall, so you relax, and then you hit whatever there is, because there's a boardwalk, there's whatever there is, there's a bottle or whatever, or when they kick you. then that's the most dangerous thing in self-defense. Everything else, and being too drunk is also not a good idea.
No.
But
The only time I was facing a criminal who had two big rings on, big square rings, and he had sharpened the edges. And I was advancing on him, trying to gain control of his hands. And I didn't realize at the time that he was cutting my hands. He was backing up and he was cutting my hands with the edges of the rings. Not bad cuts, but
yeah,
once I realized he was cutting me, I did an Arimi technique and I moved in and I put my leg behind his leg and my arm in front of him. And in Chinese martial arts, we call it bie. And it's a scissor effect. And his legs replaced his head and his head hit the concrete. And I'll never forget that sound. And is the only time in
yeah,
combat that I thought I instantly killed a guy. I thought
yeah,
he was dead. Luckily, he wasn't. I mean, because I didn't want to kill him, but I wasn't going to get my hands cut. I mean, what if he went now? What if he went to cut my neck or something? I had to take him out, right?
right.
Um, but yeah, that was so. Yeah, when you throw someone properly,
That's an ippon. That's 100% an ippon. You cannot strike so hard as you can throw someone. Even if you just most throws are done very civilized. So I help the
right,
guy, I hold him up and other thing. But if I don't want to help him and
right,
I don't care about him, I just let him fly,
right,
and
yeah, and
that's not good.
like in Chen Tai Ji, um, every throw we do, every one is designed to drive the opponent onto his head. So
Oh,
when you learn the real Chen Tai Ji, the martial system, like they
oh,
tell you right out, every throw is designed to drive the opponent on his head. So
oh,
like
that's
you can't practice like that though. So obviously we don't
yeah,
practice like that because it's too dangerous, right?
yeah,
So you're very careful, right? But yeah, that's what the throw and I believe it's the same with jujitsu. I believe when you really do a throw, it's and you throw a guy right, it's devastating. I mean,
yes,
I haven't used that. I've used Osotagari a lot in combat. So
yeah,
Osotagari I've used a lot, but
yeah,
usually, the guy hits the ground, he gets shook up, I roll him and I handcuff him, right? But I also used Ukiotoshi one time where you pull the guy behind the head, drop to your knee, and throw him over. And when I did that, in the dojo, the guy jumps, right? So he jumps and he takes the nice fall and he slaps out on the mat.
um,
But the criminal, he doesn't know to jump. So he came down, slammed the side of his head, his shoulder hit the ground. I broke and dislocated his shoulder, right? And and again, just to give you an idea, he kept fighting. So I broke and
yeah,
dislocated his shoulder and he kept
yeah,
fighting. So like when you see in the UFC, the guy gets put in an armbar and he taps out right away or okay, criminals, guys that are really tough and they'll take a broken bone, they'll keep fighting. Um
yeah,
so yeah, so it's interesting the few throws I did do in combat, it didn't look anything like the way people fall in the dojo
yeah,
because these guys don't know how to fall. So
yeah,
they're just getting
right, right.
slammed into the ground.
It's brutal.
Yeah, yeah,
It's brutal. Uh, I would say like uh, I think your job as a police officer if forces you to go after the person,
right,
but a civilian guy would probably rather move backward from the threat, right?
right,
That's
right,
why I think this is so amazing to hear these stories because this is me as a civilian. For that's not the perspective that I have. The perspective
right,
that I have would like kind of move away, right?
right. But even me when I teach, like I teach constantly, avoid the conflict, like
Yeah, yeah,
avoid
yeah,
it.
yeah.
However, if you can't avoid it, you want to have these tools so you can come out on top.
Oh, yeah, right.
That's my
And
philosophy. But my
and
philosophy is, yeah, avoid the fight, avoid the problem. But like anything else, you can't always avoid it.
absolutely.
You
And the
know?
thing is, it doesn't matter who's your sensei. Uh, I mean, in certain
Right.
boundaries, right? what the style is, but you got to train hard and you got to train with intention.
Yes.
And when you learn these techniques, they're going to stay with you forever. That's much more important than being a member of Association X or doing this or having another badge or certificate.
Yeah.
I'm saying that because a long time ago, I learned the Atemi Waza. And you know, there's my Atemi and Yoko's Atemi. And I was brought into a conflict. And um, so one guy, he dropped, and so I was standing at the some part away, and the situation seemed to have calmed down. And then a guy, and I was standing like this, and the guy from there, I saw him from the eye, just in the
Right.
last minute. He came from below, where there was a staircase from below, and he like a football player. And
Right.
he was about to tackle me on the
Tackle you.
street
Yep.
in timing with the Mercedes cars coming there.
Right.
Right. So, and I saw him, and I did that 100% that Atemi Waza, and that saved my life. And that guy, he went on the street like this, and he rubbed over the asphalt, and he had all open. And the Mercedes driver, he made a curve, so he drove around it, so he survived.
Right.
Because otherwise, he would have died. He would
Right.
have, or at least he
Right.
would have been
Hurt. He would have been
over.
seriously hurt.
So, and that's what I'm saying. What the way you train and the mindset that you train is much more important, and you're gonna learn that forever. It's gonna stick with you forever.
Yeah.
So that's. Thank
So
you.
when
That was a
do
great
you
opportunity to come and tell you.
when do you think the book's going to be finished?
Oh, I'm right. I'm at it, and I just have 3 books that I ordered from Japan that I had to have
Okay.
for just like very tiny information. 1,000 pages, but I need to say, I'm trying to finish it in July.
Okay. I'm going to send you the name of another book.
Yeah.
After we get off, I'm going to send you the name of another book. I don't know if
Okay,
you can
great.
get it. I think you can though. So,
Okay.
um,
So this is going to be awesome because I have a lot of illustrations. I'm going to tell about, what there is, about the techniques, what it means. Then the medical examination, they started in 1883, and it continued until like the 1940s or so. This is where you be told like which suture this is, which bones, and then the zygomatic bone and the frontal bone. There's this place here, and all this. Yeah, the neck, the K-chu, the neck
so this is
center.
C7, right? They call it C7. It's the little bump that sticks out.
Yeah,
In some of the jujitsu kata, that's where we strike to. In the
I
style
think
I
it's
teach, we strike there. So
I think they have the K-chu is at um at the 3 or 4, but the 7, for some reason, I guess they left it out because it's the most dangerous.
right, maybe, I don't know, but
Probably.
yeah.
So maybe that was the part of the Kuden, or the oral transmission, where they tell things like, if you really hate the guy, you go for that.
Right, right. Well, I'm looking forward to the book. Once I get it and read it, I'll have you on again and we'll talk about the book. We'll take a deep dive and we'll promote the book and get people to buy it. It's funny. I had a bunch of authors on like a couple of weeks in a row, and I was promoting their books, and I had people sending me messages. Stop having these authors on. I'm spending all this money on books. Every week I'm buying a new book. And then they would laugh and say, no, keep having them on, And so yeah. So listen, I appreciate you coming on again.
No, thank you.
And keep up the good work. And when the new book comes out, we'll have you on and we'll talk about it and promote the book.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me, Mike Sensei.
All right. Thanks, Andreas. Take care. So, hope you enjoyed that interview with Andreas Quast Sensei. I like talking to him all the time. We correspond all the time on different things. Really one of the really good researchers out there, doing a lot of good work for both karate, kobudo, and other things. Look forward to his upcoming book on Atemi Waza. As always, you like the interview, you like the podcast, like, share, subscribe. We have passed 17,000 subscribers. Thank you all for that. Really appreciate it. And I'll have details so you can go to Andy's author page on Amazon and purchase his books. By the way, I have several of his other books on my Kindle, so I do have them all right. So hope you enjoy that one, and I'll see you in the next podcast. Take care.